I didn't get that at the time.
No, yeah. Again, I think there are definitely some things lost in cultural,
Yeah.
um, and when we're trying to translate this over for these little things that we don't know about. But he sees this. This makes him more motivated than ever. And his mom is trying to get him to stop, right? Where she's just like,
Mhm.
"You need to stay here." And she has like this, this giant rock thing, stat thing that she's like pouring water over to pray to Shiva to stop him. And then he suddenly goes over and he just like starts like tearing the rock out of the ground, and you're like, what the
Mhm.
frick's going on? And everyone's freaking out. He's not explaining what he's doing, but then he takes the rock all the way over to the waterfall, puts it under the waterfall, and then now basically all the prayers are coming down, this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then he decides he's going to start climbing. And if I remember correctly at this time, like, this is when he sees the vision of the woman with
Okay.
the animated butterflies on her.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, she's like singing to him and he's following
Yeah.
her.
She goes,
Yeah.
"Da, da, da, da." Yeah. And then all of a sudden he's like, I must follow you. And
Mhm.
that's as we start getting a montage of him jumping and finding her. And then also we get our first true like music video that
Yes.
suddenly busts into, which
Mhm.
again is not normal in Hollywood culture.
Mhm.
It's not really because to me that a lot of these parts seem like music videos. They don't seem to me like a musical.
Yeah.
Um, they seem to have very specific things. Uh, can I take these parts seriously? And look, like you said, we weren't raised with these, and this is the first time I've watched a movie with them. I don't quite get them. Like I understand them from being like I understand the point of them being funny. Like I get
Yeah.
that. Other than that, they seem like a most of them seem like a really bad like Katy Perry video where she's gonna like culture appropriate the clothes.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing though, is I guess I wasn't so concerned about taking it seriously so much as trying to allow myself to find um the emotion they're searching for and the enjoyment there and the entertainment.
Yeah,
So it's like not that like I'm crying over it or like I'm falling in love as he's falling in love, but like I get what they're trying to do and I'm trying to put myself in that world and judge it according to what is going on in the movie.
I'm
Because
trying
like
to
you said,
I
yeah.
agree with you. I think the hard part is that there, and this is where I think that my judgment does come down. Is
Mhm,
that India is not in a bubble. They receive movies from Hollywood. They
mhm,
see films that are actually made elsewhere, right? Like they see other things going on, and yet they've created their own culture of film,
mhm.
but there are other options, right? It's like so it's hard for me to forgive. It's like Indian people all have also tasted other food and they choose to keep eating curry on everything, right?
Yeah.
I've had curry, and when you at a certain point the sins of the parents are on your own head if you
Yeah.
keep choosing curry. um so that's what's weird to me is this sort of thing where I'm like, they've seen American musicals, they've seen Lord of the Rings, they've seen these sort of things, and so it's weird for me if someone is to make this and go, we are make something the equivalent of Lord of the Rings, and I'm like, have you seen Lord of the Rings?
Yeah.
Like, have you seen these sort of things and what's going on? I
But I've seen Lord of the Rings too, and nobody picks up a chariot and throws it at somebody
That's
else.
a good point.
And that's the thing with this movie is why what I appreciated, and we can get back into the plot, but in defense of this movie, I've never seen action that every time something happens, it's not necessarily believable, but it's always inventive and entertaining every time. I've never seen somebody pick up six people and throw them all at one guy and they all land like neatly on top of somebody. I've never seen guys like put their shields together and then tie themselves to a tree and then slingshot themselves onto a wall. And it's like, I could see why if you were raised with this stuff, you would find things like John Wick or Lord of the Rings, the action boring because you're like, they have all this money and technology and all they're doing is just punching each other and pushing each other. Like, why isn't anybody doing anything, you know, like this? And I got the sense from this movie of these people aren't really supposed, all these characters, we haven't really gotten to the characters except for Bahu, but all these characters don't feel like humans, they feel like gods. They
Yeah.
feel like like I said, like Old Testament characters, people who are endowed with power and they have problems, but they're not human problems. Um, And so when they fight, they don't fight like humans. They don't fight like
Kind of,
and
but
yeah.
Bahubali, I don't know if you thought so, but I assumed watching it, and I started thinking Bahubali, or
Hmm.
the original, we'll get later into that, but this main guy, he's the one that seems separate from everybody else as like a godlike character
Yeah.
at first, right? Him
Mhm.
being able to pick up this gigantic rock, him being able to climb the stuff, him just destroying everybody. But then as the movie went on, I started realizing other people were doing things or surviving things that were also godlike. But they
Yeah.
were, right, again, like, spoiler for later in the second movie, like people putting their shields together and getting
Hmm.
on palm trees and using them as catapults, and these people flying in, and I was like, oh, other people are also doing. It seemed at first to me that he himself was more of a god character, and these other people were more normal.
Yeah. Well, what it seemed like to me was the lower land before he ascends the waterfall was more of a modern day human area.
Yeah,
And when he ascends the waterfall, he goes to an area that's again this ancient uh, kingdom and area where he is I believe he's some type of reincarnation of Shiva, right? He's supposed to be some type of reincarnation of Shiva.
something.
Um, and so they worship him as a god. But uh, these other people, like, uh, well, man, what's his name? The best swordsman, Katapa,
Yeah, Katapa.
and Balaladeva, his brother.
Yeah,
These people don't seem to be incarnations of gods at all, but they seem to be blessed by gods with super strength. And then when these armies are being led by these guys, it seems like the gods bless these people too and protect these people with certain strength. And so that's kind of what it felt like. Because I mean, just look at the design of the kingdom. So Bahu ascends the waterfall, and when he gets up there, there's this ancient kingdom that kind of rules everything. Named what was it, Mahashiva or
yeah, the Masha Amida, or they keep saying I was like respect.
yeah. I was gonna look it up. Mahish Mahishmati. Anyway, but look at the design of it. I mean, it's clearly otherworldly. It's huge, and by the way, I loved the art direction, the clothing, and the castle designs. Like it all felt like cool ancient. I mean, it didn't always look great, but it was just a cool design. But when you look at this, it feels like you're going back in time to a time where gods kind of roam the earth and bless things, and things aren't exactly making any physical sense like they would nowadays. But it didn't seem like that was happening on the lower level where he lived and was raised.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the idea I had, is he kind of went up to a land that was like physically higher ascended, and then also like spiritually and with gifts and stuff, everybody's kind of more magnificent. So that's kind of how
Yeah, so he goes up. He makes it up this giant waterfall, and he goes all the way up there, and he immediately runs into the girl who owns the mask.
Mhm.
Runs into her, and she's being chased by these people. Now he watches. He can see that she can fight. She's part of this group that obviously is like hiding in a cave.
Mhm.
They're talking about they want to get this woman back who's been captured now for 25 years in the kingdom. Get back to the king's got her. And Bahubali is, I'll just call him that because that's the thing. He
Yeah.
uh he kind of starts, so he's stalking this girl, doing
Yo.
really weird, creepy things. Like, now again, I don't understand the cultural significance, but he is swimming underwater. She's got her hand underwater and letting these fish basically kind of eat off her hand, like this weird kind of thing going on. I don't know, it's weird. But then he comes swimming up where she doesn't notice, and because they're doing that and distracting, he starts painting her.
Yeah.
Right, which gets her in trouble when she goes back to the cave. Like, oh, you're doing this, you're not paying attention, you can't go fight, and blah 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 blah. And so she's like, what in the world? And so she like teams up with her friend, and they're like, we're gonna catch this pervert, I guess. That was my thought. We're gonna catch this pervert. And so her friend goes down by the water and waits and puts her hand in. Then she gets up in a tree, and then Bahubali is so sly that he suddenly is in the tree above her, and this is, I guess, this is how he flirt. This is flirting in India, or it's just mythological flirting. I don't know. But he opens this thing up, and this CGI snake, this little snake, comes out, and it's like going on her, so she has to get distracted by it. And then he takes the time to paint her again.
Yeah, on the shoulder this time.
On the shoulder this time. It's even sexier. And then when all of a sudden he's gone, and then she realizes she's been painted again, and she's like, "What in the world?" Like this, So I don't know this again, the cultural significance of it, except for it was, it was just kind of oddly creeper activity.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, at this point in the movie, I have really no idea what's going on, because I didn't realize that the main reason he climbed was because of her. I mean, I knew she was a motivation, but I'm not sure, because now we're, like you said, now we're getting into the plot where this woman that he's fallen in love with, her name is what was her name? Avanthika?
Avantika.
Anyway, she's supposed to be like the best leader and fighter that the army has, this rebellion against Mahishmati, and they're trying to go find this lady named Devasena, and so I'm like, so now we're kind of getting into like a plot, but then I'm just not sure what Bahu's doing. Like, it's just really weird where I'm like, you have this thing of now we're getting into a really serious situation, but he's just creeping around painting this lady. And I'm like, why doesn't he talk to her? Why isn't he like, I'm just not sure. And I guess he's trying to win her heart by being sneaky, I guess. But then he like almost destroys her career, which doesn't seem like a good thing, but he's really proud of that. I'm not, it's just really hard to follow. And I found most of the movie difficult to follow except in retrospect, of like, once I saw the ending, then I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of get what they were trying to do. But I really don't think that's an editing problem or a writing problem so much as it's just that I'm not familiar with the culture of unconsensual body painting.
That's a whole part of a culture that I don't quite get. But this is I guess the point was this one of the main issues I had with part one. Was that I felt that ultimately in the 2.5 hours that went on, there really wasn't much of a plot, especially for like the first hour and a half. It was very thin. There's this guy, we don't know who he is. He climbs a waterfall and he's following a girl. You know, a king who you don't know who he is holding somebody hostage. And then you're like, okay, and there's something going on, but there's literally at this point no depth. Now that changes, but there was literally they weren't offering anything. There was dance sequences. There was some fighting going on. That kind of stuff. When we cut to the king, and the king's like, they let a bull out. And they show him like stop a bull, and he's just fighting a bull just because, right? You're like, those guys,
because he's just showing his strength. That's Bala. That's the king dude.
The king.
So there's the king named Bala Ladeva, and then his father who has the weird hand, and I don't remember his name, but
he's that guy that came into our house. I think the guy that came.
Yeah, and I like too that the whole time you can see his actual elbow and that he's holding a rubber arm. So there's this elbow of this rubber arm, and then his actual elbow in the back under the thing. And although, again, in their credit, there is a scene where I think when it's a flashback, where that guy like shows his hand and moves it and stuff, and the CGI looks really good. Like there
are moments where the CGI is fine. It's like they suddenly have CGI that's decent, and then CGI that'll cut. I feel like where somebody like, oh, they used money well here, and then another time I'm like, what in the world?
Yeah. So to recap here, Bala Ladeva, who's the king, and he's evil, and is handsome.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that's unquestionable at this point. And he's running the kingdom of Mahishmati, and he has this lady enslaved named what was her name? Devasena. That's it. Yeah. And Devasena's there, and basically he just keeps her there to torture her, and she says to the king, she goes, Baahubali will come back and save me. And he says, good, I want him to. This time I can kill him myself. Now, I thought that was a really intriguing statement because I have no idea what's going on in this movie.
Yeah.
So I was like, so he thought he killed him maybe when I couldn't really figure it out at that time. But then you have this group that we already talked about that's out to save her and break in and save her. And so now we have this thing of obviously Bahubali will team up with this rogue group and help save this woman.
Yeah.
But it's hard to uh, the reincarnation aspect of it. I did not anticipate at all. Again, I assume that if you were part of this culture, it wouldn't be that confusing for you. But I had no idea that we were dealing with something like reincarnation or anything.
And I'm still kind of confused if we really are, or if we're just dealing with somebody that played both parts to represent a father and a son looking alike. They just take the name back. I don't.
Maybe, but the whole thing I think is that Bahubali is a form of Shiva, and so Shiva keeps being reincarnated to this person, um, and that's why he gets all the memories back and stuff. But anyway, sorry, not to jump ahead too far, but so then we are introduced to a guy named Katapa, who's this old guy who's the best swordsman on the planet, and he's a slave for the bad king Balaladeva, and you can tell there's some type of tension between him and the king, but for some reason Katapa is endlessly um, devoted to him. Like he seems to like not like him, but when a man basically offers his freedom and says like I can buy your freedom or whatever, he's like no, I am Baladeva's slave, and that's what I am. And so he seems to be 100% devoted to this king, even though for some reason there seems to be tension there.
Yeah, well, I think you're getting the whole thing of the ancient thing, which is not as much today, but the idea of that honor system, that thing of
Yeah,
this is what I'm called to do, and so I'll do. That's the only way I have any honor in life.
yeah. Well, that and I think it goes on to explain better too about what happened, but of why he feels that way. But so what happens next? It's been a while since I
Yeah.
saw.
So okay. So basically, this girl realizes Bahubali. She realizes that he's there following her. So she tracks him down, and then she's just like, "Who are you?" And immediately, talking about basically trying to murder him.
Mhm.
And they end up like rolling into a music video set. Um,
Is this when they like decide to fall in love or whatever?
yeah, and then once he shows like here's the mask and I followed you and all this sort of stuff, um, she then actually begins to trust him. They immediately start to fall in love. We have a whole music video of them singing and making love. It's not like explicit or anything. It's very very PG tame, but
But we know what happened.
we know. Yeah, I don't know in India though. I don't know how things
Yeah.
go in India. But yeah, they have this whole long sequence of singing and dancing again, and they're on this set, and they basically have to do all this sort of stuff. So you're trying to figure out what's going on. Who are these people? He ends up going into the city, the actual city where the king is, and they're putting up this giant gold statue, which is about the size of a skyscraper. Now, I don't quite understand his strength because at one point he's struggling to like pick up a boulder, but at this one, the whole thing's about to fall, the whole statue, the skyscraper, and he grabs it and holds it with he's able to hold it with
He single-handedly lifts it up.
yeah, it's to hold it up, and I'm like, whoa, like how strong is this guy? I couldn't quite figure out the strength, which is normal when you're dealing with like superhero type things, right? You can't figure out why. It's kind of when we watch Superman 2, and I can't figure out why Spider-Man is fighting what's his name? He's got all the giant arms on the back of him.
Oh, Dr. Octopus.
Dr. Octopus, who just because he has these arms, he can fight, but why can he take a punch? I don't know. Right? He can take a punch from Spider-Man. I can't quite figure it out. So there's always these kind of things, or why Spider-Man can punch somebody, or they can do certain things and not accidentally kill everybody on a regular basis. But so you run into that, but he goes in and he actually shows his face, and people they're going like, oh, Bahubali, and they obviously recognize him.
Mm-hmm.
Which I didn't obviously understand at the time. Like, they're recognizing him in some way, and so his name, they all start kind of chanting, and they're thinking like, okay, so this is a big name. This name's being spread, and it starts getting back obviously to the king. Like, There, Bahubali like sneaks into the thing to see who this king is, and he's like among them. And then when they call out like who did it, he like sets everything on fire, and, like runs out giggling or something. I can't remember exactly.
Well, and the feeling I always get from all these things, basically everything he does throughout these parts, and I don't know if this is true or not, but it gets the feeling of he's fulfilling random prophecies. You
Yeah,
know, like he's doing things that everybody's in awe of. And obviously it's because they're superhuman, but at the same time, it seems like it's not just because he's superhuman, but because he's doing things that are significant. Like lifting up the statue himself seems to have some type of spiritual meaning that he doesn't quite understand, but everybody else is picking up.
yeah,
And lifting up and, you know, bringing that altar he did for his mother on the lower land and putting it under the waterfall, and all these things he keeps doing seem to have religious meaning to them that the people pick up on and find hope. And especially like in this situation where all these slaves are trying to pick up this huge idol, and then they're slipping and falling, and then he suddenly appears and saves them all and lifts it up himself, and then they start to chant and praise him. Again, he doesn't seem to understand what's going on, but the king um, uh, um, the king seems to obviously understand and realizes that there's a threat, that potentially Bahubali's back, and now it's going to be a danger for his power.
yeah. So we get this. Yeah, so we get this thing, and then we realize that the person that's being held captive there, the lady,
Yeah,
Sienna or whatever I pronounce her name, is the actual mom of this of Bahubali. She's the mom.
Mhm.
You realize that the mom's there, and she's been waiting. He's going to return. My son,
Yeah,
the baby, that thing is alive and has returned for me. Is going to be able to come back and be able to basically come back and and save me.
hmm
And I think to kind of get through this, I think the main thing happens here is that we end up getting this flashback to what was going on in a sense 50 years earlier, which
hmm
and telling the story of Bahubali, of his dad or his earlier self,
hmm
and then his brother who is the king now, and how they're raised by the queen, and how they were in this first part. They're raised up. There's obviously they have different dads. So you have
yeah.
the king's dad
His,
has
his his mom died in child. Okay, so this is the confusing thing. Okay, and this is what like threw me completely, because 50 years ago Bahubali was born, but not the Bahubali we started with,
yeah,
because that guy's only 25 at this point.
yeah,
So it's his father, right?
yeah,
Is it his father? So it's Bahubali, same actor, same, it's reincarnation of Shiva, it seems like, but it's actually biologically the father of the guy we're watching in the beginning of the movie. And so he's born and his mother dies in childbirth, right?
yeah,
And because this I was very confused about the lineage here. Um, and then Devasena, the lady who is trapped currently by Balaladeva, she takes him, right?
yeah. Yes, this was
Is that
all.
right?
Yeah, it was all a bit hard to track though.
Because the lady in the beginning of the movie who drowns in the river,
That's the queen mother.
that's the queen mother. Okay, so that's
That's the one that actually.
Balaladeva's mom.
Yeah, that's actually the one that takes Bahubali in.
Yeah.
It takes Bahubali and the king's mother.
Okay.
So you don't realize that at the beginning,
Yeah.
obviously, or who she is. You figure it's Bahubali's mom, the one that.
Yeah.
That's getting good. Yeah,
This is I still have a hard time following everything. But anyway, so yeah, we get this flashback and we see him being raised, and how Bahubali's like very he loves his mother, he loves Devasena, and he takes a what is it, a snake bite for her, or is it or a scorpion sting or something?
yeah,
Basically he's constantly sacrificing himself for her. He's all about ethics and morality, and being fair and loving, where Baladeva, his half brother or step-brother, whatever we call him, is kind of the we kind of have a Cain and Abel type situation here, where it's like
yeah,
both potential to do really good, but one's more selfish and one's more worried about authority, where the other one's more worried about love. And um and again, uh, we find that Katapa, that old guy who was the best with the swords, loves Bahubali, and he's basically sworn to protect, and basically he swears to do anything and die for Bahubali. And so we see that that love that he has for him and that dedication he has for him.
Yeah. And so this all leads to the fact that they both get older.
Mm-hmm.
They both want to, well, Bahubali doesn't really go for it. He's not really going after the throne. But the mom makes this law from the beginning that whichever child, in a sense, shows compassion and care for people first, mm-hmm. that will be her law of setting up who will basically ascend to the throne.
Yeah.
Now, Bahubali's brother, who is a becoming king, has a much more devious dad with the gimpy arm.
Mm-hmm.
He has certain things he wants for his son. It feels like Bahubali is, the mom loves him more, and all this sort of stuff. So you set up for this big time where this big war that's about to happen. They're about to be invaded by a group of darker skinned Indians, I guess.
Yeah, they haven't got quite as woke as we have out here.
Yeah, that's woke. And so the darker skinned people, who are the bad people in this, I was immediately offended. Mm-hmm. They're looking to be able to attack. So you have this big war thing to set up the end of the movie, where we're back in time. It's about 25 years at this point before the current movie begins. Mm-hmm. And they have this big war, and you have this gigantic action sequence. One, you have the future king. He rides out. If anybody's seen the Hobbit extended version of the Battle of the Five Armies, it's very similar. Where he's got this contraption he drives, and on the front of it, a giant blade.
Yeah, the horses. Yeah,
just takes people out.
Mm-hmm.
And then Bahubali is just running in, and he's riding through and taking everybody out as well. And one of the things that happens during this battle, the pivotal moments that they see, is that the future king, when it comes down to it, that the other side actually holds hostages and holds them up, he just runs over the innocent people.
Yeah.
To win the war.
Is this all in the first movie?
What? Yeah.
This is in the first movie? I swear. Okay, because is this the? I don't know why I'm. Was this the one where they said basically whoever kills the king will get the throne?
Yeah. So but the mom's like, I don't want the king dead.
Yeah. So whoever brings me the king, right?
I bring him to me. I want to basically cut his arms and legs off, and I want him being eaten and stuff. So Bahubali shows compassion on the people that are held hostage. He finds a way to send the troops that they actually make those people survive, and he thinks of that first. They do this one idea, which is quite cool. Mm-hmm. I don't know how well it's pulled off, but it is quite cool that they are able to shoot these giant tarps.
Oh yeah.
That land on the people, and then those things are soaked and stuff. So then they hit them with fire.
Yeah, and everything burns.
So yeah, they do that giant thing that we did in PE, where you put the giant thing over it and it turns into a giant.
Yeah, the big parachute.
Yeah. So it was actually kind of a cool idea. It was it didn't quite work fully for me, only because the CGI wasn't great.
Mm-hmm.
But this also did have the scene you're saying, where there's a part where Bahubali's fighting and he gets thrown against this thing, and he's hurt. And this guy picks people up and he throws them at Bahubali, and they're screaming and I don't know what was happening, but everybody flies very comfortably, flies on top of him.
Yeah, they all land very neatly on, and that's the thing. That's why I said if, and you may disagree, but the action in this, while doesn't necessarily look always great, and you kind of have to take physics out of it because they aren't even attempting to make physics make any sense, right? I mean, Bahu constantly, do you notice that he has nothing on him, but he'll put his hand down and then a giant sword thing comes to his, where's it coming from? It doesn't, who cares? They don't care. And then Baladeva, he has that ball on the end of the stick, but then he'll throw it and then the ball will come off and it's attached with chain, and then the chain will just be 200 feet long, and then he'll just zoom into this little handle. I mean, and so I think you kind of have to get out of this idea of attempting to make it to make sense physically, and it's almost just an exercise in what's the craziest, most entertaining things we can do here.
Yeah.
Like, can he just grab people and throw them, and then throw the spears and attach people to trees, and I mean, you're just doing crazy stuff. And like I said, like um most, like I said, most of the movie I was kind of bored, and in this one I was not bored necessarily, but like you said, I felt it was kind of shallow. I was confused, and it was taking a long time. I didn't really know. But then once this battle started, I was like, this is like entertaining. I mean, it's not, to me, it's hard. I wouldn't want to compare it to like the Battle of Helm's Deep in Lord of the Rings. I just feel like it's a completely different thing.
I referred to, so I was watching the end of it and I referred out loud to it as the Battle of Helm's Deep, the Dollar Tree version. That's what it felt like to me. I was like,
It's the Dollar Tree, but it's also like, it's like, instead of putting money into I don't want to say serious filmmaking, but they put all their ideas into just like uh what's the craziest thing we can do here, like let's just make this insane. And which I know is pretty normal for Bollywood. I've seen scenes from Bollywood films where the action is just crazy over the top.
Yeah.
But when it's set in this fantasy setting, like I said, I'm just like, to me, it's more like comparable to um, comparing it to something like Transporter or Commando or something where it's not supposed to make sense physically.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be entertaining. And it's supposed to get across the power of the gods and things like that. And while watching it, I'm like I was invested when they finally get down to meeting that king, the black guy, the evil guy, and you're like, who's going to kill him and what's going to happen? I was actually invested. Like, and not like, again, not like I was on the verge of tears or anything, but I wasn't just completely didn't care one way or the other. I was interested, and I was like interested in the relationship between Baladeva and Bahubali, and I think for me, the ability to get me to that point, especially with the nonsense that's going on in this movie, to me is um, a point to prove that I think the movie works. Because I was like, oh, cool. What's gonna like? What are they gonna do when they meet? Like, are they gonna fight? And is it gonna be crazy? And you know what I mean? I was actually kind of interested in this battle scene.
Yeah. So so before I tell you like my thought at the end of this thing, the Bahubali's gonna possibly kill this guy. His brother uses his 4,000-foot giant ball on a leash. Then he comes in, he smashes this guy and kills him. And so he's like, I'll become king. His dad's like, good, you're gonna become king. And then the mother's like, no, compassion was shown. She goes back to that law. Compassion was shown by Bahubali. He will become king, and everyone's of course like the dad's pissed, but everyone else is super happy. And we cut back to original part of the movie. Now we find out. Now this is the first part for me, and the only part for me in the first movie that I was like that I felt anything for, and I was like, oh, interesting for me. And that was they reveal that the slave, who's like the best sword fighter, works for the king, was the one who killed the original Bahubali.
Yeah.
I portrayed him, I killed him. And I was like, interesting. I was like, and it ends with that. It ends with a shot of him stabbing him through, and you go, I wonder how that happens. Now, so for me to kind of wrap up this first movie, my thought, the difference for me, I was bored out of my mind. Now, the last 20 minutes, I got a little more interested, but at an hour and a half, I was like, this movie's been on 6 hours, because I was like, there's literally no plot going on in this thing.
Yeah.
There's no plot. There's a music video. There's action sequences, and they're over the top, but I wouldn't call them I wouldn't exactly like. I love over the top action sequences, and I love what they're going for. Like, I love the idea of just letting it go and being like, this guy is going to be throwing stuff. But you also sometimes have to have the money and dare to say the talent to back up these scenes so that they're more fun. And it's
Yeah.
hard, and it's also tough, which is when you're watching and you're going like, I need a little bit of depth here. Just
Hmm.
like give me a sequence of depth when I'm watching so that I it's and this is the problem with the first movie for me. Again, it's 2.5 hours, and I understand it's two parts. But the first one, I'm like, you gotta make me care a little bit here. I don't
Yeah.
know who any of these people are.
Hmm.
Anybody. Like I don't know who anybody is. I have no reason to care about Baahubali. He hasn't done anything. He wanted to climb a waterfall, and he did that. And then he chases a girl for a long time, and then he shows up, and they're like, "Here's your story about what's going on," and he's like, "I'm mad," and I'm
Yeah.
like, "I don't know who this. Like, I have no reason to care about him. The
Yeah.
girl I don't care about yet." But the thing at the end of finding out that this guy had betrayed him was the first time that I felt there was a character move.
Yeah.
And I went, okay, they set all this up, and they actually set up a thing enough to make me go, oh, I wonder why that happened, and that's interesting.
Hmm. Well, and I'll say this about that. I don't think you're necessarily wrong. I watched it with somebody,
Yeah.
and I think that helped a lot because because it's a movie that you can talk and laugh during, because it's so over the top. So the first hour and a half, I wasn't loving it in any way. But I wasn't bored. I was just watching it and I thought it was funny. And, it was just kind of weird. I was just confused most of the time. But I remember when the first one ended, when it shows that part where Katapa stabs him, you don't know why. I remember thinking, I want to watch the next one because I like that war scene at the end. And like I said, the one complaint I have, and it's really the only real complaint I have. I mean, I guess although like I said, I don't disagree with you. I think you could have established characters better. I do wonder if this is a thing where Bahubali is a mythological character, in that it's like watching Passion of the Christ with no knowledge of the Bible, and you're going like, who is this guy and why do I care about him?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if it's like, well, they're assuming you have some basic understanding. I don't know. But but my issue with this is purely editing. This movie, I felt like, should have started with the birth of the first Bahubali, and we should have followed it from there. Um, because the second movie, uh, um, because it's just this random edit. You just get this long hour and a half, basically opening scene that doesn't explain much. And like you said, it's just kind of like going, and then suddenly you cut back, and then you feel like you're actually watching the movie. And I felt like that's the biggest weakness in this movie, and it holds up to the next one too, where I'm like, why did we start the movie with him on the lower world and taking an hour and a half to get to the top and for anything to start going?
Yeah.
Because the interesting stuff is, and we'll talk more about it, but to me, surprisingly, the relationship between Bahubali and Katapa is interesting,
Yeah.
and the relationship between Bahubali and Baladeva is the kind of the core of the tension of the movie, and you have neither of those, and those characters aren't even introduced or in any real way,
Yeah.
until the flashback. And so my issue is, once that flashback starts in the first movie, that and then onward throughout the next movie, I was pretty interested. I mean, I do have kind of a complaint in the next one about why this a certain love thing takes so long, uh but other than that, I mean, like, I just felt like it was a weird editing choice that, to me, shows a weakness in editing that I have a hard time just blaming on style or culture or different way of filmmaking.
So
I
again,
just blame it straight on poor editing.
no, I think I'm going to describe. I'm going to get a little more of that. So next episode, guys, when we talk about Bahubali 2, the conclusion,
Mm.
we can discuss a little more. So I think in retrospect, I think for myself watching this movie alone, this first half, we'll see if I figure out the second half. For the first half, I was like, this is the worst movie we've ever watched.
Yeah.
Bar none for me. Like, worst thing I've ever watched, not ever watched. I think definitely worst movies. But for as what we've watched, I was like, this is the hardest for me to get through. And I'm trying to be cultural, that sort of thing. But in the second part, we get we get the same, but it's a bit different. And
Yeah.
so I think that the discussion on that will be a bit different. So thank you guys for watching, and we will be back soon.